Everybody except those of you who are on the wall that can't sit down, and I apologize for that. But I do want to tell you, seriously, it doesn't bother us at all if you want to sit on the floor, whatever you need to do. You can come sit on the stage if you want. I don't care. I really would rather you be comfortable. This is the 19th year that I've seen a ride in. And I've seen y'all roll in every year. I'm always out there to watch, and that means I've known you for fully half of my career. And that surprised me when I realized that we've been doing this since I was in my 40s. And I think I've been able to stay in one church for so long for two reasons, other than just the grace of God to let me stay here. And the first reason I think I've been allowed to stay this long in one church is simply that this church is a really good church. I mean, these people are real. I know some of you only see it once a year. You're from far away. These people are real. They're not arrogant. They're not pretentious. They are forgiving because they realize that they're not all that either. These people are full of mercy and grace. They've forgiven me for a lot of dumb things that I've done over the years. Since I was 27, I've made a lot of mistakes. Around here, we like to say, we're all messed up. And if you think you're not messed up, you're really messed up. The second reason I think I've been allowed to remain here is because I'm a simple man. I like to keep things simple. I am not up for the latest trends and the latest buzzwords. Some people like to gum up the works with complexity. For me, things can get so complicated that I get confused. Simple, I can understand. For example, I'm a big fan of Jeeps made before 1970. That's when AMC bought them out and began building Jeeps. Jeep did not ask my opinion, but I was not on board. Coincidentally, that same year, 1969, AMF bought Harley Davidson. And I know some of you sadomasochists like the 70s era Harleys that AMF built. Personally, I think if you're going to ride a motorcycle built by AMF, the wheels ought to be bowling balls. But back to Jeeps. Previous to 1970, Willys Jeeps had two main engines. My wife's going to call me out on that. I've never called them Willys. It's Willis to me. Two main engines, the Go Devil and the Hurricane. Both of them boasted, you car and truck guys, both of these engines boasted a massive 134 cubic inches. They were so simple. The Go Devil was a flathead four-cylinder that anybody could understand because they were basically like four Briggs & Stratton engines welded together and timed. When they switched over to the Hurricane, all they did was make it an overhead valve setup. Both of my Jeeps, I have a 1954 and a 1965, both of my Jeeps have those wonderfully simple engines in them. And both of them still run like the day they were made. They're simple, but they'll run a lot longer than Ford's massively complicated and horribly designed three-valve Triton. Yeah, you know, don't you? Or General Motors boat anchor aluminum engines they put in the Vegas. Simplicity just works for me. So today I'd like to bring a message that's nothing if not simple. Today I want you to leave here remembering just three words that represent the main things God expects from us. Because a lot of us pay lip service to God without giving Him even what He asks for and the very least of what He deserves. So what does God really want from us? That's a pretty important question. I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but when I die, I want to feel like I at least gave my best effort to giving God the simple things He asks for. That is the least I can do. Here's the first word of the three that I want you to remember. The first of three things, at the very least, that God asks for. Number one, we owe God respect. That is the least we can give Him. And I don't think we even have to discuss why He deserves our respect. I mean, for goodness sakes, He's the source of everything. He deserves all of our respect. Some people expect respect when they don't even deserve it. Sports teams and their fans are a great example. It doesn't matter how terrible their record is. It doesn't matter how many times they've handed a game to their opponents on a silver platter. They act like they're big and bad and like you're supposed to respect them. Not to single anybody out, but are there any Cowboys fans here today? All right, how do the rest of you feel about the Cowboys? Wait. No, don't boo them. Don't boo them. I mean, look, the Cowboys are a gutsy team. They are the only team in the NFL brave enough to make their official logo the same as their most common Yelp review. I'm going to give it a minute so the Cowboys fans can get it. That was low-hanging fruit, but isn't it funny how we humans demand respect for pretty much nothing, but we refuse to give respect to the only one who really deserves it? I mean, think about it. What do we have to brag about? We're all born the same way, crying and helpless. We spend the first few years of our lives totally dependent upon others. I mean, all you have to do in that period to kill us is just simply walk away. Then for a few more years, we're moody, whining, little pimply-faced complainers. And the vast majority of us, maybe all of us, if we ever really make it, it's because others helped us along the way. And then at the end, we become like we were at birth, helpless and totally dependent upon others. I mean, we're called mortals. It's from the Latin word mortalis, which translates, those who will die. Tell me again what you've got to brag about. Listen, if anybody understands respect, it's this crowd. I'm serious. You car and truck people, when you take your ride to a show, I loved watching you roll in today. By the way, haven't we got some of the coolest cars and trucks we've ever had at this event? And those guys were kind of late to the party. This started as strictly a motorcycle event. We're so happy to have you guys. But you car and truck people, when you take your ride to a show, I mean, when you roll in, you're aware that there are people who love Fords, and then there are people who are confused. No, seriously. Even if somebody isn't all that into whatever it is you drive, you at least expect them to respect the hours and effort it took to get your car looking like that. You're looking for a little respect for what you brought in. All the stuff you did, all the time you spent tearing down the rotten, freeing up the seized, sanding and restoration and modification and painting, all of that stuff. You expect that people will respect all that work and effort. And my goodness, we all know the biker world is built around respect. I've told this before, but I just love it. The little girl's walking down the street in her neighborhood when a big old tattooed biker rolls up and offers her a ride. She turns him down, of course, and he says, "I'll buy you a bag of candy if you'll get on my bike." She says, "No, go away." And she walks faster. He catches up with her and he says, "Listen, just ride with me just once around the block and I'll buy you any kind of candy you want and I'll give you $20. The girl whirls on him and says, "Daddy, I told you to buy the fat boy, but you bought the Honda, you ride the Honda." Now, I told that joke again because it's a great example of respect, but even me telling that joke is an example of respect. Let me explain. The people at this church, I've been here 38 years, 39, probably this week. 39 years I've been here, and they show so much respect for me in this church that they listen to the same jokes and laugh anyway. It's true. But once a year, somebody is in the crowd. Make some noise if you know Brenda Riddell. Where are you, Brenda? Stand up so I can see you. Where are you, Brenda? Somebody point her out to me. There she is. That's Brenda. Every year, right after the ride in, Brenda calls me and says, "You need some new jokes." That's a lack of respect. I know a lot about lack of respect because I ride a Japanese bike. 113 cubic inch engine, still no respect. couple of years ago at a ride-in, I'm scarfing down delicious barbecue, and a couple of guys say, while I'm sitting there eating my barbecue, I've done all my work, the day is over, and I'm just eating my lunch. A couple of guys walk over and say, dude, did you know your bike is leaking bad? I leave my plate, walk to the parking lot, and these clowns have left, under my bike, a big pile of white rice. That's a true story. I don't get no respect, I'm telling you. In Proverbs 23:17, we read, do not let your heart envy sinners, but always be zealous for the fear of the Lord. That idea, fear of the Lord, is an often repeated phrase in the Bible, and I think there's such a thing as healthy fear. I don't think there's anything wrong with healthy fear. I feared my dad, but only if I had talked back to him. So I think there's plenty of room to fear God when you're opposing Him. But this verse and others like it use a word for fear that means having a very healthy respect for who He is. Remember that word, respect. God deserves that and so much more from you. It's why the third, I'm going to step on your toes now, but it's why the third commandment is to not take the name of God in vain. It's the one we are first to dismiss. We think it's okay. It is totally and completely disrespectful. Listen to me. God's name should be reserved for respectful admiration and reverence. It is not a convenient swear word, and if it pops out of your mouth without thinking, you need to work on your respect. If you yell out, Jesus Christ, you need to check yourself. And it's none of your business, and you have no right to tell God who or what God should damn. And you are also taking God's name in vain if you claim to belong to Him, yet you consistently act in ways contrary to His character. Show some respect. I really thought about this message, and I thought, what do I really want to communicate to you? Number one, I want to communicate to you, we have a great time here, and I love every one of y'all, and we have but show some respect for the only one who deserves it. If you can't show respect for the one who created the heavens and the earth, then I'm telling you the rest of this message is going to be wasted on you, because you have to be at least working on respect to pull off the other two. The second word I want you to remember is this. We owe God obedience. I said this is going to be a simple sermon. Just 3 things God wants from us. If we will commit to respect our Creator, then our next step is obedience. Romans 6:17 says, though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. I want you to read that again. You obey, look at the screens, you obey if you are no longer slaves to sin. That's when you're obeying. When you're no longer slaves to sin. If you are not striving from your heart, keep looking at the screens, if you're not striving from your heart to obey the teaching of God that has now claimed your allegiance, in other words, you're saying, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, oh yeah, I love Jesus, oh yeah, I'm riding for Jesus. If you are not striving from your heart to obey the teaching of God that has now claimed your allegiance, then you are still slaves to sin. Now let's get real here, boys and girls. There is real obedience and there is pretend obedience. Which is yours? There is real obedience and there is pretend obedience. Which one is yours? This is a true story. I have a friend, and he's here today. I saw him in the parking lot. I have a friend that was a biker. He's still a biker. But he was a biker among a very rough crowd in Hyattsville, Maryland in the early 1960s. Some of you know the crowd I'm talking about. In 1968, Maryland first enacted a universal motorcycle helmet law. And as you might imagine, not everybody obeyed the rules. They were disobedient. The police met with these cats and told them that if they didn't have helmets the next time they saw them, they would be ticketed. The club was riding a few weeks later, and they were pulled over. Each one had a helmet, but they were tied securely to their sissy bars. The police said, very funny, but you have to wear them, and they left. The next day, the club was seen again and pulled over again. Each biker had a helmet securely strapped to his thigh. Now, the patience of the police was about worn out, so they strapped on some brain buckets on their heads, and they went on their way. My friend swears that story is true. We know how bikers lie, but here's what I know. There is real obedience and there is pretend obedience. God is patient, forgiving, and gracious, but He will not be mocked. Honestly, a lot of us seem to think we can pull one over on Him. We talk a big game, but we're not playing by the rules. You know, the people that, let's put these two words together, respect and obedience. The people that I respected growing up and as an adult, the people I respected, I pretty much obeyed. I had and still have a tremendous amount of respect for my mother and daddy, though they both went home years ago. Because of that respect I had for them, I tried mostly to meet the expectation of obedience they had for me. I graduated high school and I went to work. When it came to employers, my respect for them wavered a little, not like my mom and dad. Some I thought a lot of, others not so much. But my daddy taught me a lesson. I was working for a firm that installed and repaired hospital electronics. Now, I was young, impetuous, and I talked about my boss and disagreed with him behind his back, but he wasn't unreasonable in his expectations of me. And he paid me okay for the times. His son is here today. He rode in on a motorcycle, my boss's son, and a good friend of mine. One Friday night, I was at my parents' dinner table, and I started complaining about that man, complaining about my boss. Mostly nitpicky things, but I took it too far. When my dad had heard enough, he set his fork down, wiped his mouth on a napkin, and leaned over the table toward me. I didn't know exactly what was wrong, but I knew this wasn't going to be good. He looked at me and he said, I just heard Jack Tuck laugh, and that reminds me, Jack worked for the same company the same time I did. So Jack and Paul, you know who I'm talking about. Daddy leaned over the table and he said, did you get paid today? Just like that. I said, yes, sir. He said, who signed the check? I said, Mr. Foreman. My father said, so you're going to spend money he paid you on your girlfriend tonight. And you're going to use it to pay your rent and put food in your refrigerator. And then he gave me the knockout blow. He said, as long as you're cashing his checks and putting your feet under my table, you're not going to talk about him like that. You're going to shut your mouth, and when he says jump, you're going to ask him, how high, Mr. Foreman? Otherwise, put your fork down and leave my table. Now, it wasn't until that moment that I realized that I had never, ever heard my father complain about his bosses. Because his father, my grandfather, had run a large farming operation supplying food for the troops during World War II. And Daddy had watched people take his dad's money sometime when they didn't have enough to get by because they were paying all their farm hands. Daddy had watched people take his dad's money, giving them work in a tough time, and then whining and complaining about my grandfather behind his back. That shaped my dad's attitudes about his employers, and then later it shaped my attitudes too. They were supplying my income, and my respectful obedience was owed to them as long as they weren't being unreasonable. Now, has God been unreasonable with you? 1 John 5:3 says, for the love of God is this, that we obey His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome. So my parents, my employers, I learned to respect them. And that respect in turn required that I give them my obedience as long as their commands were reasonable. A little later in life than most, I went to college. And I'll be honest, I'd never spent much time around academic people. In fact, I didn't know anybody in my family who had ever graduated from a college. So I was impressed with my college professors who knew their stuff. Two of my professors held degrees from both Harvard and Yale. And you best believe I respected them. And when they gave me an assignment, I tried to obey them and complete it. I tried to be obedient. And you know, every time I've been obedient to someone that I respected, it's worked out well for me. When I obeyed my parents, I avoided my father's firm hand of discipline. When I obeyed an employer, I got paid on time and I rose in the company ranks. When I obeyed my professors, I learned from their vast storehouses of knowledge and experience, and I got my degree, and I have prospered in my chosen field. And when I'm smart enough to be obedient to God, later, I look in the rearview mirror and I see how much better off I am than if I had taken any other path. I have found love from my Creator, direction for my life, forgiveness of my sin, freedom from guilt, and a promise of eternal life. I've asked you to remember 3 words. What's the first one? Respect. What's the second one? 2 things God has every right to expect from us. Don't you agree? Respect simply because of who He is. Obedience because that proves my allegiance to God, and His commands are not burdensome nor are they unreasonable. And that obedience is always to my advantage. One more word. We owe God gratitude. I don't think I've talked about this from this stage ever, but the story is applicable, so I'm going to tell you all about it. And I'm not trying to get views, but I have a YouTube channel that has enjoyed moderate success. It has nothing to do with ministry, nothing to do with discipleship. It simply chronicles the pursuit of my hobby, which is hunting for and recovering Civil War relics and artifacts. 3 weeks ago, a man named Frank left an uncharacteristically long comment on a video. Though I don't talk about it or overtly advertise it, he said that he had been watching for a while and he thought I might be a Christian. I think mostly just because he'd never heard me cuss. And I'm glad. I was glad to hear that. And it's true, at the end of every video I have a little sign-off catchphrase that I use. And it's the only sign of my spirituality on the whole channel. And I always end with, remember to say your prayers. But that's it. Frank was very forthcoming about his past. He was an unashamed unbeliever all of his life. Drank and smoked heavily, wrecked his body. In 2006, he got married, and his wife began to help him start to change. But now, due to his past, he has end-stage heart disease and coronary artery disease. Now, you can call this a deathbed conversion if you like. I don't care what you call it because I only care what God thinks about it. But he's one of the lucky ones because his terminal illness gave him time to turn to God. And he wrote to me in this, and if you're familiar with YouTube videos, there's a comment section. You can comment. And he's writing this long thing to me that everybody else can read. And he wrote that only he is to blame. He said, I made my own decisions, and the chickens have come home to roost, and I know that. This man, a total stranger to me, I have no idea who he is, quote, this is what he said, you don't owe me anything, but could you pray for me and help me, in his words, not go to the bad place? Oh, he didn't know what he unleashed. I bet it took him a half hour to read my reply. It was full of scripture and a little bit of preaching. But the most important thing I said to him was this. I said, Frank, if you've asked forgiveness, then it's not about you anymore. It's about what Jesus did for you. Now, there's more to it, but it all starts there. And here's the point. I really want you to hear this. If my salvation has far less to do with who I've been and what I've done, but it has far more to do with what Jesus did for me, then what do I owe him more than anything? Gratitude. If it's not about me anymore and it's all about Jesus, I owe him gratitude. I was a drowning man, and there was no way I could make it to shore. Jesus reached out his hand and said, hold on to me. He didn't say, have you cleaned up your life? He didn't say, are you reading your Bible every day and going to church on Sunday? He didn't look at me floundering in the water and say, do you smoke and do you chew, or do you go with girls who do? He didn't say, if you can prove to me that you're a good guy, I'll throw you a life jacket. None of that. He just said, quick, grab my hand. His powerful hand took my weak hand, and he jerked me out of the waves and set my feet on dry land. Now, what do I owe that guy? And you might say, you owe him everything, and you'd be right. But the first thing I owe him, and the very least thing I owe him, is a big thank you and deep, heartfelt gratitude that never diminishes. Can we agree on that? Now, true gratitude doesn't end with, thank you very much. Gratitude demands a heart trained on the one I owe gratitude to. It demands a special, respectful place in my heart, and that little space in my heart is reserved always for the one to whom I am so thankful. A man was just married, and within a month he found himself lying to his wife already. He told her he was going to work, but he went fishing instead. Standing in tall bulrushes, he cast out his bait, and his wedding ring slipped off his finger and fell into that deep, tall grass. And he absolutely panicked. He searched and he searched, but of course the ring was hopelessly lost. He fell to his knees and he cried out to God, and he said, God, if you'll just help me find my wedding ring, I promise I will change. I'll quit drinking. I'll go to church every Sunday, and I swear I'll never lie to my wife again. And down on his knees, he put his head between his knees, and there was the ring right under his nose. He grabbed it and looked toward heaven and said, never mind, God, I found it. Let me end with this story. Back in the 1960s, beachgoers in Coconut Grove, Florida, used to see a man walk into a fishing pier with a bucket of shrimp. It's a true story. This is not urban legend. He would feed the seagulls until the bucket was empty. A few days later, he'd come back and do it again. Very few knew who he was. His name was Eddie Rickenbacker. He was the most highly decorated pilot of World War I. He was a Medal of Honor recipient who also flew in World War II. In October of 1942, he and his B-17 crew of 7 were shot down over the Pacific. One life raft deployed out of the plane before it went down, and they crammed into that life raft and were adrift for 8 days. On the 8th day, nearly delirious, Eddie bowed his head to pray, and a passing seagull landed on his cap. He grabbed it. The crew ate its flesh and used its intestines for bait, with which they caught enough fish to survive, using the fish's guts to catch more fish. In this way, they survived until they were rescued on the 24th day. For the rest of his life, this Medal of Honor winning flying ace and head of Eastern Airlines carried a deep and profound gratitude, and it didn't end with thank you very much. And the only way he knew how, he regularly went down to the pier with a bucket of shrimp to say thank you to the seagulls. God deserves so much more of our sincere and real gratitude than a flock of seagulls does. Check your gratitude. If you say you're thankful, how do you express it? Do you come to the weekly memorial service that honors the self-sacrifice of the one who gave his blood to save you? Do you talk to him occasionally through real, thoughtful, and focused prayer? Do you listen to him by reading the letter that he left you? This message is pretty simple. 3 things that are the very least you can do for God if you claim to be a Christian. Respect him. He deserves that. Obey him. You'll make out a whole lot better if you do. And finally, show him the gratitude he deserves. if you've never publicly let it be known that you want to be on God's side, I'm going to invite you to do that right now. I'm going to invite you to publicly affirm the belief that you have in your heart. I'm going to invite you to commit to doing what God wants more than you jumping on doing whatever it is that you want. And I'm going to invite you to be baptized for the forgiveness of everything in your past. At this church, that baptistry, over there, it's dark right now, but that baptistry always got water in it. It's always warm. Almost always. A couple times they told me it was warm and it wasn't. I'm going to ask the Faith Walk team, wherever you are, I want you to go ahead and get in position right now. If we can put some light on the baptistry over there so you can see those people. Those people are here every Sunday so that if there's someone who has a decision to make for Jesus, they can help you make that decision. They'll show you where the shirts and the shorts and the towels are, and where there are private changing rooms where you can go in the back and you can get changed, and we'll baptize you. I heard Billy Graham one time say, if I wasn't sure of my salvation, you couldn't get me out of this stadium until I had made sure. We have the water. We have the shirts and the shorts for you to wear, plenty of towels. You can start a whole new life before you even leave this place today. These people are waiting to help you. Come if you're ready.